now I'm just getting ready to inoculate, and today I'm going to be using some sawdust spawn to inoculate these blocks with lion's mane. So these bags have been inoculated with grain spawn, allowed to colonize. Now that they're fully colonized, I'm going to basically expand them out another generation to production blocks. I've noticed that the yield is pretty good with sawdust spawn with the lion's mane. We still average around 2.5 pounds a block on the first flush, sometimes even 3. So we just make sure the bags kind of get a little wiped down. Just break up the block, trying to get as little clumps as possible. There's tons of little small pieces of sawdust in here that are each colonized with mushroom mycelium. So the sawdust will create tons of inoculation points, and we'll get a really quick colonization. Each of these bags will be used to inoculate 10 more blocks. So if I were to go ahead and fruit these now, since they've been inoculated with grain spawn, I'd probably get about a 3-pound first flush, but I guess you gotta weigh the pros and cons of using sawdust spawn as opposed to grain spawn. Because, you know, I could get 3 pounds on the first flush out of this one block, but then again, I could also take it and turn it into 10 blocks and get 2.5 pounds on the first flush of those bags. So if you have the time, could be very good for your production. Most of the time we do use grain spawn, but this comes in handy when you just want to expand out your mycelium a little bit more than you normally would to get the most out of it, basically. So I'll see what else we have in our spawn inventory. Just the chestnut right now, and some black pearl, and let's see. Go ahead and start using some of our reishi spawn. Go ahead and do some maitake as well. Put these on standby. Since we have our table filled with genetic material to use to inoculate, we'll go ahead and get through this first and come back for more. So I'll just put on a couple layers of shoe coverings just before I go in there. Then I like to just give myself a fine little mist. Just get some labels ready. Just wash off my bag a second time, some isopropyl alcohol before I start inoculating. I might also check the temperature of the substrate in here. So we're sitting in the 70s, high 70s, between 77 to 79 degrees. So it's looking good. And then I start setting myself up. So I'll heat up my scalpel while that's going on. Get myself staged. I'll check it to make sure it's airtight. If it's not, we'll give it another seal. Go ahead and slap a label on it. So just kind of keep my inoculation station and my surfaces kind of clean in between inoculations or sets of inoculations. The inoculating with sawdust spawn as opposed to inoculating with grain spawn, it's basically the same procedure. You're pouring the inoculum into the bag. It acts as basically a spawn. It colonizes the substrate just as grain spawn would. The only thing is grain spawn is a little bit more nutritious, so you're probably going to get a little bit more of a yield. But I look at it as, you know, you could take one block and get 3 pounds for your first flush on like a grain spawn inoculation. Or I've noticed when I use sawdust spawn, I might get like a 1/4 pound to a 1/2 pound less per block, but that block gets expanded out. Instead of just getting 3 pounds, you know, I have 10 blocks that are now producing 2.5 pounds, so it's like 25 pounds. So I'd rather go that route. Sometimes we just have tons of grain spawn, or most of the time we do. So we can just inoculate with grain spawn, and from there just go straight to fruiting. But right now, lion's mane's been really popular for us, so we're just trying to get the most out of it. I've noticed with lion's mane and shiitake, inoculating with sawdust spawn is pretty similar yields that you would get with grain spawn, as for me that is. So it works out just fine. So when moving bags across my surface, I kind of just grab it by the edges and pinch it shut. That way it stays sealed a little bit before it makes it to the impulse sealer. If any clumps find it into our substrate, we just break it up. So usually it takes about 5 to 10 seconds to get a good seal on these bags. If you don't at least wait 5 seconds, I found that you're bound to get kind of like a leak or some kind of hole or tear. That's why I just like using 2 of these impulse sealers at this point, so I can kind of bounce around and let them cool down accordingly. keeps me moving in my lab. Keeps me occupied. So at this point, I'm gonna move bags out of the lab.